Welcome back to the channel. In the previous part of our Hells Angels vs. Pagans series, we discussed the murder of Fransisco Rosado, the Pagan Bronx chapter president, and the ensuing chaos. With the Angels abandoning the area, the Pagans were able to move in unopposed, leading to increased tension between the two gangs. This hostility didn't go unnoticed, and the Hells Angels soon retaliated, planning a large motorcade to reassert their dominance and send a clear warning to the Pagans that on May 14th, 2022, about 100 Hells Angels bikers took to the streets, initially only planning a drive-by to assert their presence. However, some of the more aggressive members of the convoy broke off, planning a deadly attack. A group of 40 bikers split off, with 5 equipped with walkie-talkies to block any escape routes. They informed the rest of the group, which was armed with knives, hammers, and bats, that they were ready to assault the Pagan clubhouse. When they arrived, the Pagans, though outnumbered, fought back with their meager 7 members, but were ultimately overwhelmed by the Hells Angels. The battle was brief, but brutal. The bikers left behind a trail of chaos, with injured Pagans clinging to life. 7 were rushed to the hospital, with one sustaining a knife wound in the arm. Local authorities took swift action, closing down the Pagan clubhouse and conducting multiple FBI raids across Hells Angels properties nationwide. Despite the temporary lull in violence, tensions between the two gangs remain high, and it feels as though the situation is on the brink of another eruption. There were no real winners in this violent clash, only government crackdowns and escalating hostilities. The rivalry between Hells Angels and Pagans seems to be a never-ending cycle of pride, violence, and inevitable fallout. As we dive deeper into the criminal history of the Hells Angels, we uncover the dangerous figures who have fueled this ongoing war. Let's take a look at some of the most notorious members and their violent pasts, starting with David Wolf Carroll, a key figure in the Hells Angels criminal empire. Through his affiliation with the Halifax-based gang, the 13th Tribe, David Wolf Carroll would forge an alliance with the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. His reputation grew as he became notorious for his role in the Lennoxville Massacre on March 24, 1985. The massacre was a planned purge intended to eliminate a bad branch of the Hells Angels that had been making the organization appear disorganized and undisciplined in the late 1970s. The Hells Angels experienced significant growth, particularly in Montreal, leading to the decision to split the city's chapter into 2, Montreal North and Montreal South. The Montreal South chapter, located in Sorel, northeast of Montreal, was headed by Rayon Zig Lard, a more disciplined leader, while the Montreal North chapter was under the command of Laurent Longley-Vio, a former member of the Popeyes, another outlaw motorcycle gang. Vio's unpredictable and reckless behavior soon spun out of control, especially following the murder of Montreal chapter president Yves Leos Bao. Bao was killed outside the Longer restaurant along with Frenchie Gilbert, the president of the Kitchener, Ontario chapter of the Satan's Choice biker gang, who had been considering joining the Hells Angels. After Bao's death, Michel Sky Langa took over as president of the Montreal North chapter, but his leadership lacked the strong control Bao had previously held. Vio's chaotic leadership led to the skimming of profits intended to be shared with other chapters and the heavy abuse of substances meant for distribution. This irresponsible behavior brought unwanted attention from law enforcement, tarnishing the Hells Angels' reputation as a professional criminal organization. The growing instability between the Montreal North and South chapters came to a head. The South chapter, under Lard, adhered to a more organized approach to crime, while Vio's North chapter became a liability. The final straw came when Yves Apache Trudeau, a founding member of the North chapter and the gang's best hitman, stole money paid by Wolf for a contract killing. Trudeau's actions, driven by his cocaine addiction, drew the wrath of both Wolf and Lard, who saw it as a betrayal that in response, Wolf and Lard, along with Jorge Bulabui, the president of the Sherbrooke chapter, devised a plan to eliminate the North chapter. They agreed that the North chapter had become too unstable and needed to be eradicated. The plan was set in motion, and the North chapter's demise was sealed by the hands of their own brothers. The Sherbrooke, Halifax, and other chapters gathered in one room for a party at the Sherbrooke chapter clubhouse. The North chapter's tardiness was evident, as the entire chapter failed to show up on the initial day. The party was extended by a day, with attendance made mandatory. The North chapter finally showed up the following day, with VO and 4 other members present. However, the other chapters learned that Yves Trudeau was absent because he was undergoing drug rehabilitation, narrowly escaping the massacre. And on the next day, the 5 North chapter members were ambushed by 41 Hells Angels, who trapped them and shot them dead. Wolf disappeared into the night as the Canadian state issued a warrant for his arrest, charging him with 13 counts of first-degree murder. Wolf evaded capture, leading to the closure of the Halifax chapter and the conviction of several Hells Angels members. Yves Apache Trudeau, born on February 4th, 1946, in Quebec, Yves Trudeau became one of the most notorious killers to emerge from the biker gang wars in Canada. Despite not fitting the traditional image of a bulky biker, standing at 5 feet 6 inches and weighing just 135 pounds, Trudeau became the Hells Angels' go-to assassin. By his early 20s, he was entrenched in the world of organized crime, joining the Popeyes Motorcycle Club, an outlaw gang formed in 1965, which later had ties to the Hells Angels. The Popeyes, a club born out of resistance against the ultra-conservative Union Nationale Party in Quebec, were known for their violence. The club's association with the Hells Angels led to a strategic alliance, especially in the face of Popeye's bitter rivalry with the Satan's Choice motorcycle gang. Trudeau, proving himself as a deadly assassin, gained respect for his role in eliminating members of rival factions. He went on to become a founding member of the Hells Angels in Quebec when the Popeyes patched over to the Angels on December 5th, 1977, that Trudeau's violent tendencies sparked a war between the Hells Angels and the Outlaws motorcycle gang. He gained infamy after mercilessly killing 2 outlaws outside a bar frequented by Hells Angels. Over the years, he confessed to killing 43 people between 1970 and 1985, including 18 of the 23 outlaws he encountered during the 1978 to 1983 conflict. However, Trudeau's reckless actions eventually led him to make poor choices that placed him in danger. After narrowly surviving an assassination attempt, he chose to clean up his act and get sober. Eventually, he became a government informant, testifying against several individuals involved in organized crime. He passed away in 2008 due to cancer. The Pagans Motorcycle Club. The Pagans Motorcycle Club quickly established itself as a force in the criminal underworld. From the start, they adopted a formal constitution and governance structure, and they chose a national president. Emerging in the late 1960s, the Pagans became synonymous with violence and grew rapidly during the post-Vietnam War era, attracting former soldiers. Under the leadership of John Satan Marin, the club expanded to around 5,000 members by the early 1970s. One of the Pagans' defining traits was their decentralized structure, with no fixed headquarters and the highest level of leadership consisting of 13 members at all times. Although the Hells Angels gained greater notoriety, the Pagans rose to prominence through narcotics and firearm smuggling, establishing significant trafficking operations not only in the US but also to Canada and other international markets. Operating mostly on the US East Coast in states like Florida, New York, and Massachusetts, the Pagans maintained a strong presence in the illegal drug and firearms trade. In the 2020s, 30 Pagans members were convicted by a federal grand jury in Pittsburgh for narcotics trafficking and firearms possession. Despite their success, the Pagans struggled to expand into Canada due to the country's strict anti-biker laws and the violent reputation of the Hells Angels. This expansion attempt was abandoned, with Pagans member Andrew Sheff Glick revealing that the Canadian authorities' intense crackdown, coupled with the violent nature of Hells Angels in the North, made it impossible to establish a foothold. Nevertheless, the Pagans continued to engage in violent acts. On July 17, 1994, at the Tri-County Annual Charity Fest, a violent altercation led to the deaths of 2 Pagans and a member of the Tri-County chapter being slashed in the throat. Another violent act occurred in 2005 when the Pagans assassinated the vice president of the Hells Angels Philadelphia chapter. The Pagans also acted as intermediaries in various biker conflicts. The Pagans Motorcycle Club maintained ties with various crime families across multiple states, including their association with the prominent Lakaw family in Pittsburgh. One notable figure in this connection was Anthony "Rocky" Lakaw, the nephew of former gang boss John Lakaw. Despite being sentenced to life in prison for the murder of John Hetherington, Anthony's resilience allowed him to continue expanding his criminal empire from behind bars. Similarly, another pagan associate, Jason Evans, was arrested on April 8, 2022, and sentenced to 57 months for his involvement in large-scale drug trafficking operations in Pittsburgh. This was just one example of the club's ongoing illegal activities. In 2018, one of the most significant busts occurred when 49 members of the Pagans were arrested in Rhode Island. The seizure included 52 firearms, a rocket launcher, and a large quantity of drugs, including marijuana, crack cocaine, and heroin. It seems that, in the end, neither the Pagans nor the Hells Angels have ever truly escaped the consequences of their criminal lifestyles. Both gangs appear to embody the age-old adage, "Those who live by the sword, die by the sword."